The first trick is weaving together old memories. When we experience something, say I have to do a calculation now at work, and how do I do that now? I go back, my brain goes back and it remembers when I did similar calculations, what did I use then? And then the brain draws that picture from the past, it brings it in the now, and it shows me how things could be going now. And this process is happening the same way also when you cook your favorite meal, or when you cook any kind of meal, or when you do a certain route when you go to work. Your brain goes back to what has it seen before and what's best fitting now, and that's how it interprets the moment. And that's what you see right now. And it takes memories from the past and puts it together as a nice image to look at in the head right now, so that you can work off of that image. And this weaving together of old images is happening so easily, so smoothly, and so unconsciously that most people are not aware of in their entire lives. And only when you start to realize, there's pictures in the head, and you start to get acquainted with the process in your head, you then suddenly see, okay, I'm seeing this image from the past again, and it's been shown to me for a good use of now. But it necessarily isn't a good use of now, but it's just an image from the past, and then I can check if I want to use it now. I'm now taking you through some study findings that they've done on weaving together old memories. There was a group in a room, and the group saw a slideshow, and on the slideshow there was a car going up to a crossroads. The car turned right and then knocked over a pedestrian. So everyone sees the same picture. And on that corner there was a yield sign. So when the car turned, there was a yield sign that people looked at. Then they separated the group out, and one group they didn't ask anything, and the other group they asked the question, when the car drove up to the crossroads with a stop sign and then turned right, the person was knocked over, did another car come from the other side? So they asked the question and the people answered that question. Fine up to this moment. Then they separately asked those groups, which of the signs did you actually see in the presentation? Did you see the yield sign that was actually on the slides, or did you see a stop sign? And the people that was asked the question about the stop sign, 90% said they saw a stop sign in the presentation. And of the other group that hadn't seen anything except for the real slideshow, 90% said they had seen a yield sign. So by simply asking a question about a stop sign, changed the memory in the image of the head, which is quite massive. So you can, when you speak about something, you can put a new picture in a person's head without the person even noticing. Now I'm going to take you through how we actually see, and I'm going to use an object here for that. And I'm going to use the pen I have here behind me. If you look at this pen, you can see the pen, and it goes in your eyes and in your visual center, and you have a visual experience. If I now put that pen behind my back, you can't see it, but you can remember what the pen looked like. In your head, you can see the pen, although you don't see a pen. And this is how memories work. It is something saved in the head that you can draw and look on, even though it isn't there. For the next trick, I'm going to talk you through the anatomy of the eye. But before I do that, I'm going to ask you to get a piece of paper and get a pen and create a sheet like this. It doesn't have to be the same size. It doesn't have to be a fat pen either. But you need a smiley on the left-hand side and a dot on the right-hand side. I'm going to ask you to pause the video now and get those materials. Okay, now that you have the material, I'm going to tell you again on the piece of paper. On the left-hand side, you want the smiley. On the right-hand side, in about a distance that far, you want the dot on the paper. And before we use that now, I'm going to take you through the anatomy of the eye. When we look at the eye itself, the human eye, at the back of the eye, we have seeing cells. And in those seeing cells, the light is taken in, it's channeled at the back into a nerve, and the nerve goes up into the brain. At that very point where the nerve goes up, that is your blind spot because it's nerve and not seeing cells. So in this point, you actually don't see. You usually don't notice that because we're just used to looking the way we look, but I'm going to help you see your blind spot in the eye. I'm going to ask you to take that piece of paper, close off your left eye. With the right eye, look at the smiley and then really focus on the smiley and move the piece of paper closer to you about this distance. Then the dot on the right-hand side disappears. When you move it closer, the dot comes back. When you move it further away, the dot comes back. But in this position, all you see is the smiley. And basically, all you see in that point is a blank piece of paper where there actually is a black dot. I'm going to reflect with you now. What did you actually see on that paper? Did you see the dot or did you see something else? And most people now go, well, I saw a blank piece of paper. So you know there's a dot, but your eye tells you something else. And so do you see the reality when you look at that? And you go, oh, well, I really, in the blind spot, I don't see the reality. I see what my brain shows me, that it thinks it's true. It's the surroundings that it's pasting over that spot where there's a black dot. So you see just a blank piece of paper. And the next question is, does your brain warn you that you're seeing something that actually isn't there? The answer pretty clearly is it doesn't warn you at all. It looks so nice and smooth like a blank piece of paper, but there really is that dot. So this is something where you can see against yourself that your eye sees stuff that isn't there. So it's nothing that you have to believe me or believe other people. It's really something that you can check within you. So the conclusions from the blind spot are that we see things in the blind spot that really aren't there. So we're shown stuff that isn't there and we don't really see what is there. So there is always this thing of when you see something where your brain shows you something, it might be true or it might not be true. This function is a rather widely used function by the brain because almost everything you look at in the head is not there. Like when you remember how you took the car to work this morning, you're not in the car, you're in your work right now or in your home right now. Or when you remember the vacation that you had last year, you remember pictures from the head and your brain shows you what it thinks there was and not necessarily what exactly it was. Also when you project vacation, and I find that really funny, when you book a vacation, you have all these ideas, what's going to happen, like this and that's going to happen, this is how the place is going to be like. So your brain shows you projections and then you check in the hotel and you go, oh, that's not what I thought. That's this process because your brain shows you a certain way of how things are, and reality isn't necessarily always what the brain shows you to be. It is this process that we basically live in all the time, where our brain shows us something from the past or from the future, and sometimes these projections are correct and sometimes they're not. So basically there is a blind spot in the mind's eye. And most of our lives really is a replay in the brain or a projection of some kind of forward imaging of what will happen and doesn't have a whole lot to do with seeing actually facts. I would like for you now to pause a little bit and think about where in working with colleagues or with my parents or with my partner or with my kids you could look into this process and say, hey, where does it maybe make sense to check if there is anything happening in their blind spot that I'm seeing, or vice versa? I'm now going to have you read a sentence on a slide, and in this sentence you're going to see one of the further tricks of the brain, that's trick 3, where we constantly preview what will happen. We have a function in ourselves that most people aren't aware of and hardly anyone uses, but you can use it really well when you work together with people. It is that our brain constantly projects what's going to happen the next 3 to 5 seconds. So your brain constantly foresees the next whatever few sentences or words there are. So I'm going to let you read through the example on the page now. Now everyone reading the line goes, "Oh, you won't believe how nice the party potato." Your brain projects that the word potato should really not be there. Your brain projects, "You won't believe how nice the party was," or "how nice the party ended." So your brain has a very quick way of recognizing, wait a minute, the image I have outside of me does not match the image I have inside of me. And you can use that in dialogues, because when you talk to people like that, the moment you hear something from the outside that isn't matching what you see in the inside, you can use for image checking and to close a gap in understanding between people talking. Trick 4 of the brain is that we imagine the future with many unnoticed gaps. The way imagining the future works is that your brain goes back to things it saw in the past. It takes the ones that it thinks are relevant for the now and it projects them in the future. But your brain can only see pictures that it had seen in the past. So it's not taking anything that's never happened to you, and it's not also taking the averages. It usually projects the extremes. So when you forecast in your mind what's going to happen, you forecast things with many unnoticed gaps. We very often see that in project work when people say, it's going to be easy to do this project, blah, blah, blah. And then they run into hurdles they had not foreseen, and they sometimes also don't know how to overcome. But that's part of the projection. So it's not like I would say, the person is stupid or they didn't do the thing right. No, they just believed their projection. That's why when it comes to working together in organizations and when you try to achieve things together, it's really important to plan with several people to see what's going to happen, because different brains will contribute different pictures for you to project the future more accurately. The functioning of the brain that I just talked about, as well as the tricks of the brain I talked about, are mainly coming from the book Stumbling on Happiness from Dan Gilbert. He is a Harvard professor for psychology. And if you are interested in reading up a bit more about that, you can go back to this book. It's a really funny book to read on top, but also very educational.